most would agree that in our society, in the United States, kind of the epitome of success would be a C-suite position in one of these top companies. And so they started asking these executives questions about their relationships with friends, relationships with their children, relationships with their significant others, questions about their health, questions about their emotional state. And I don't remember the numbers exactly, but an overwhelmingly large number of them reported failed marriages. They regretted that they worked 80 to 100 hours a week during their children's formative years, and now their kids are off to college. They don't really know them. Many of them had significant health problems because they neglected their health.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Dr. Richard, who's back for another chat, and we're going to learn how to be happier in life and in our work. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. I just finished reading Range: Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. I think we tend to specialize way too early, and that prevents us from great success. There are rare exceptions, like Tiger Woods. However, for many others, that's not the best path. David discovered that in most fields, especially those that are complex and unpredictable, generalists, not specialists, are primed to excel. Generalists often find their path late, and they juggle many interests rather than focusing on one. They're also more creative, more agile, and able to make better connections than their more specialized peers who can't see that. I'm glad we didn't have our kids so focused and expose them to a variety of different areas and different sports. While they say that money is in the niches, it really is there when you have a broad base of knowledge that you bring to that particular niche. It's when you bring an expertise in another area and apply it to a new area. Last week's action step was to write down your vision. The best book I found to help with this is Living Forward by Michael Hyatt. I have my vision written down, along with my life plans. People who do have such clarity that it makes life's choices so much easier and simpler. I take all my coaching clients through the book because it helps us know where we're going. And once we know where we're going, it's so much easier to get there. Today, we have Dr. Richard back to talk about what he's been working on and how to help people be happier. You can learn about his backstory in episode 89. Dr. Richard is a licensed clinical psychologist and the host of the rapidly growing podcast, The Daily Helping. Food for the brain, knowledge from experts, tools to win at life. He helps listeners become the best version of themselves. He hosts well-known guests, including me, who followed their passion and have shared their vision of making the world a better place. His show's movement is to get 1 million people each day to commit acts of kindness for others and post it on their social media using the hashtag #MyDailyHelping. Let's meet Dr. Richard again. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Dr. Richard. It's great to have you join us again today.
It's awesome to be back. I think of like the Saturday Night Live episode with Alec Baldwin, and he eventually got the jacket for being a 5-timer. So I'm on my way, Rocky. Great to be back.
That you are. And I know you're doing so much great stuff. We're going to have you back again.
Can't wait.
So we normally start off with a standard question, but since you've been here before, I want to talk about something different. And I know the last time you shared your story of a near-death accident and how that sent you down a very different path in life for the better. And I recently heard something that was the opposite. I know someone who faced a near-death experience, and it was a health issue. And when they came out of it, they actually went 180 degrees opposite of what you did. They turned into everything was about them. Is that something you see with people who sometimes face near-death? Do they become selfish and go the opposite direction?
They certainly can. And if you recall from our prior conversation, while it is the case that my near-death experience through that car accident ultimately led to transformative change, one, it didn't happen overnight. And I still found myself inundated with fear and depression and negativity before the pain reached a threshold for me where I just really felt compelled to make a change. But there's a lot of things that can happen to a person who goes through something like that, and they can really become fractured psychologically and have PTSD. That's something that we see often. Or they really, depending on a lot of factors, might take a mentality in which they shift their focus to what we refer to in the clinical space as an external locus of control, and that is attributing circumstances which happen to their lives as being out of their control. And so people who have an external locus of control generally tend to be more negative, more pessimistic, and view themselves as a victim of circumstances with an inability to change their stars.
That's interesting. And I guess, is there something that we can do to maybe change our reactions because we're always going to face things? I mean, we're not going to face near death every day, but every day we face something. How do we change the way we look at what's happening in life and the reaction we have to it?
So that's a great question. In psychology, one of the techniques that we often use is called cognitive reframing, which essentially takes a person through a series of activities in which they take what was a negative circumstance and they find a way to make it positive. So, for example, for somebody like me who went through my accident, using it as an example here, I did break my back, but I wasn't paralyzed, and I very well could have been paralyzed. So, instead of focusing on, oh, great, I've got this fractured spine, there's pain, there's scar tissue, there's all these things, focusing on the fact that I will never have to be in a wheelchair. I won't have to breathe through a tube like Christopher Reeves did, when he had his horse injury. Like, that's kind of what you can do. And so it's very easy to find opportunities to find positive. And I had on my show John O'Leary about a year ago, and he told a really amazing story about how he went into a prison and spoke to inmates that were on death row and asked them to name some things in their lives that were positive. Now, again, he's not a clinician, but he's still having them focus on positive aspects of their life. And a couple of the inmates kind of snickered and like, man, I'm on death row. There's nothing positive. And one guy got up and said, I have shelter. I have 3 meals a day. I have a hot shower. And John said that as he was having this interview with that guy and that guy was speaking, he could see the facial expressions of everybody else and their change. So sometimes it takes that jolt, and sometimes we might have to solicit the people that we're closest to help us find some of those positive things when we're stuck. But you can find them. And when you start doing that, when you start looking at the positive, it changes things for you, not just psychologically, but physiologically, right? We know that when you're in a better space emotionally, that you're having hormones which promote well-being, promote increased, an elevated mood. Those things get released rather than when you're focusing on the negative, you're having things like cortisol pump into your body, which promotes stress and all other kinds of health issues. So that would be the first step that I would recommend.
And thank you for sharing that. And that's one of the things that I've kind of learned and I'm trying to take to heart is how your body is positioned has a dramatic impact on how you're feeling. So, when you're putting yourself in the physical stance of being happy or excited, it's a lot different than when you put yourself in a physical stance of being depressed. You can look at somebody and go, oh, they look depressed, or they look happy, or they look elated. So that connection between the mind and body has been enlightening for me.
What's really interesting, too, about that, Rocky, is that we're learning increasingly that mind-body connection is deeper than a lot of people originally thought. And, the more kind of Eastern and holistic community have said this for a while. It's really only more recently that Western medicine and science is saying, yeah, you know what, this isn't so woo-woo. This is actually legitimate. And now we're really starting to peel back the layers and understand the relationship between gut bacteria and brain functioning and emotional distress. And they're connected. They're connected in ways that we didn't really think that they were. So that's exactly right on. And, it's not just about having physical wellness or emotional wellness. It's really understanding that there is a significant link between the two.
And we just had Dr. LaValle on. He talked about the microbiome and that connection. So
awesome. Very
good. It all
good.
kind of fits together. And I'm little by little, as I learn these things, I try and share it with the audience so that they can start to see that there are these connections. And I know sometimes we get a little woo-woo, but I always try to bring it back and show, hey, here is the connection between the woo-woo and money in your pocket and an amazing life. They all kind of go together when you figure it out.
It's very much a chocolate and peanut butter kind of thing, right? Like those things are good by themselves. But when you can put them all together and you're experiencing wellness across all the important dimensions in your life, that's when we really see optimum happiness.
And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But before we do, the last time we were on, you were launching a charity, Every Kid Rocks. I'd love to hear an update on what's going on with that.
Thank you for that. So yes, so we launched Every Kid Rocks not long after I had your episode, and we are continuing to raise funds. And if you're listening to this and love tax deductions and want to help kids, feel free to check us out at Every Kid Rocks and give us a donation, because what your dollars are going to do is help a kid who just needs a push to reach their true potential and receive time-limited speech, physical, and occupational therapy. I know we talked about this at length on your last show, so I'm not going to rehash the story, but there are many, many kids who need just a little bit of therapy services, but because they don't technically qualify for them, because they don't exceed a threshold set by state and federal mandates, they might get passed over. And so we like to be that middle ground for where those kids that just, they weren't severe enough to be mandated recipients of aid, we can give those kids a boost. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It's something that's so important to me and my wife as well. This was something that was born out of potential tragedy for us, and we found a way to use it to make a difference in the lives of others.
And this is something that I struggle with because I do a lot of coaching with kids, and I see everyone's putting all the money on the bottom 20%, and everyone's celebrating the top 1% and pushing them forward. But you've got a group of kids, probably I'll call it that top 19%, who are ignored, who with just a little bit of help in a variety of different ways could go on to be great. And yet, as a society, we ignore these kids. And I feel bad because it's like we're losing so much potential because we're like, they'll figure it out.
they'll figure it out, or from an education standpoint, the system isn't equipped to help those. And so what you will find in a classroom setting is oftentimes the educator is going to do whatever they can to put a Band-Aid on their classroom situation. That is, if you have the kid that's acting up, that is disruptive, let's put them on Ritalin or Adderall and quiet them up. Whereas those kids who have these issues that we're helping facilitate fixing, those are the silent kids who might not be problem children. They just sit there, but they understand that the schoolwork is harder for them than their peers. They don't know why. And so what that potentially leads to is a child who goes down this road of having diminished self-esteem and an increased risk for things like depression and anxiety over time, because those are the kids historically that just get passed over because they're either not a troublemaker or nobody has to help them. They might get C's and D's, but that's okay, right? The system isn't going to flag those kids. The system, we're going to flag the kids getting F's or the kids who are throwing chairs or things like that. So absolutely, and it's not going to change systemically probably anytime soon. So we're grateful that we can play a role and help those children.
And thank you for doing that. And I find that for these kids, it doesn't take a lot. You don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time. They just need that little edge. And it's not hard to do that if you can appropriately find them and give it to them. And so thank you so much for what you do there.
I appreciate your kind words, Rocky. Thank you. Absolutely.
So you're also working and you have a podcast at the Daily Helping. What's been going on there recently and what have you learned from your interviews?
What is so interesting about podcasting or interviewing people in general is that oftentimes I'm excited to have a guest on the show, and we're in well over 100 countries now, and we're really getting some exciting high profile authors and influencers, and it's been just an honor to have them on the show. But oftentimes what you see is that a lot of what they go through, their challenges are the same challenges that you have, that I have, that your audience has. So we're all humans and we're all going through the same thing. Now, some of the people, of course, that come on and have these extraordinary adversity, issues of adversity that they overcome. And I love those kind of interviews. But when you boil it down to it, we're all humans and we all have so many of the similar challenges. So it's really, I think, excellent that we can talk about those and kind of all go through these things together and help ourselves improve one another.
And that's what I try to do here, is just open different doors and shift the lens that people look at life through and see that there are so much more opportunities. And it's, that's my one regret in life, is always like, wow, if I were 20 now, the things that I could have learned that were just hard to learn at my age, because these opportunities just weren't available. There was no such thing as a podcast and the internet. It was so difficult to find the information. And today it's all out there. And you just got to get people to take action and just start learning and start reading and start listening and take a little step every day. Step into the fear and try something. As you said, we all have struggles in our past, but that does not need to define our future.
Well, I would agree with a lot of that. Certainly, technology has changed the way we as a society are able to access information. I would also argue, Rocky, that if you suddenly at the age of 22 woke up in 2019 with the opportunity to have a smartphone in your pocket and do all these things, the experience wouldn't be the same, because it's the stories, the things that you went through shaped who you are. And now you've gone through all those things and you're able to apply the lessons, the victories and the setbacks to live your best life all these years later. So I do think technology is fantastic. I mean, Dale Carnegie's been preaching stuff since way back in the 1930s, and you could always order these audio cassettes for Brian Tracy. I had some when I was first out of college, and so I think the materials have been there. I just think that they're much more accessible now. in terms of how quickly you can get the material. Obviously, we can get information instantly now, which was something we couldn't do 20, 30 years ago. But we also have search engines where somebody who's looking for those resources in a community that didn't have access to them. If you really wanted to learn how to improve your life and you didn't have a guide, you couldn't go in. There was no Google to say, how do I become happier, right? Like you had to kind of figure it out on your own. So in that respect, I think, that's one of the wonderful things that we're living with now in 2019, that anybody can get access to this kind of information as readily and quickly as they need it, and then really build their journey.
And that's very true. It was hard to find those cassette tapes, and it was also hard to figure out who was good. And then they were expensive. I mean, you could easily spend hundreds of dollars on some of those programs, if not thousands. And then it's also the support of the community that goes along with it.
Right, for sure.
Which is now truly, I think, becoming the bigger thing, is that you can find people who have, who are on the same journey as you, one step ahead. You can get into communities and start having real conversations. And so I think that's also dramatically shifting things.
No doubt about that. And the community, when you have support behind you, that's the quickest way to achieve a goal, because you have people that are holding you accountable and motivating you and pushing you forward. So that's a big difference.
It is. It would have taken a long time in the old days to handwrite a letter, stick it in an envelope, mail it across the country, wait for someone to write up their response and mail it back to you. It's things are much faster. So you've been doing some exciting work this past year, and you created a new company called Mars Industries. What's the why behind it? Why did you do it, and what's this all about?
Mars Industries came around because, as a psychologist, one of the things that really frustrated me was the nature of the psychological assessment industry. So this industry is probably one of the greedier industries I've ever been exposed to. And, I'm saying this coming from a corporate sales background originally, right? So the industry is predicated on a couple of things: that it has these gatekeepers, and the instruments that are used basically are used to do one thing, and that's find something pretty wrong with whoever's taking it, to the degree that you really have to have a bad diagnosis in these things, because the way that the medical community works and the psychology community is no different, is that it's all insurance driven. So, for example, even when I was in graduate school and we were talking about learning the different diagnoses and what's major depression and what's bipolar depression and what's dysthymia, what are all these different things, there was a diagnosis called adjustment disorder. There still is. I should say, like, it's in past tense. But this is the kind of disorder you might give a kid who goes off to college and they're a freshman and they miss their family for a bit, and it's not severe. It's not like they need to be hospitalized, but insurance companies don't reimburse for adjustment disorder. They only reimburse if it's major depression and worse. So I say that as a backdrop so to help your audience understand that these assessments are created to be generally pejorative and find things wrong with people, highlight things that are wrong with people to the degree that they're diagnosable, which means that there is a corresponding insurance code. And so the whole industry is just focused on money and just what's wrong about a person. And I felt as though the people who needed access to help the most weren't getting access to tools. And in addition to that, somebody, for example, who was struggling with addiction, most of the tools out there, which is kind of rubber stamp you, congratulations, you're an addict. And so I wanted to do something that was different, and I wanted to be disruptive to the industry. In fact, my model was Michael Dell in the late 90s, what he did to the PC industry. Like, I wanted to create a very different way of psychological assessments in which I could have direct access to consumers, so that I'm breaking down these barriers and removing the gatekeepers. I wanted these assessments to be affordable so that anybody who needed them could have access to them, could have immediate results. And I wanted to build it to where the assessments highlighted things that are good about a person, things that are strengths that you could build on, as well as focus areas, and do so using a model upon which it was affiliate based and that people could make money on their own helping other people. So that was the impetus for me creating Mars. And so far, none of the major, I've been to some of these big events where some of the historically large players in the $7 billion industry are hanging out. And I haven't seen any, red laser light up on my chest yet. I think they're aware of me, but no, they haven't sent their people after me yet. But that was the impetus. I just want people to be able to find out what's great about them, have access, and be able to start making transformative changes in their lives without having to go pay thousands of dollars to do it through a clinician, a psychologist.
And that's very true, because I think in the medical community, we aren't designed to increase your health or to make you healthier. We're designed to fix problems. So when you go to the doctor, you're not going there to say, how do I become healthier? You're there to fix something that's not working currently within your system. And I know, like, for most of these things, you look at cholesterol, diabetes, all these things, the answer is diet and exercise, which nobody wants to hear. But your doctor, the insurance company's not going to pay for that. And they don't have the time, nor are they paid to help you with that. They're there to fix problems. And I guess in the psychological thing, it's the same thing. Can you go to a psychiatrist and go, make me happier? And what do they do with you?
They give you a pill, is what they do. You're exactly right. And I'm saying this as a Western trained clinician, but I'm also a social worker. And so, kind of being able to have a foot in both worlds was really helpful for me, particularly as I was putting this company together as well, because what you find is the Western model of treating patients, regardless of modality, you're exactly right, is symptom driven. It's not root cause driven. It's not preventative. It's reactionary to the symptoms. Let's alleviate the symptoms. So you're 100% right. You would never be able to go to a clinician and say, hey, I'm doing pretty good. Would like to be a little bit happier. Maybe I'm 70% of the way there. No insurance company in the universe is going to help you. And so then it becomes a resource issue, right? So if you're of means and you have all the money in the world to just go hang out with a therapist and pay, $250 a session or whatever it is, cool, you can do that. But most people can't. And so, I do think it's interesting. I feel to some respect, as there has been a shift, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, that within the business space in the last couple of decades, there has been a push more towards mission-driven businesses, altruism. And Bob Berg talks about this so eloquently in his book, The Go-Giver. I've seen that in business. The medical world is embracing that to a far lesser extent and far more slowly. But I do think that there, particularly in the newer generation of younger clinicians, I do think that that's there, because that, generally speaking, tends to be a focus of millennials, and then Gen Z tend to be more interested in purpose-driven endeavors. So you're starting to see that, but the medical world is, particularly in the United States, is decades away, probably, from making that kind of a shift towards, instead of being reactionary, let's be preventative. Let's look at holism and let's get people right so that these things don't become an issue.
And I agree with you on that. And you still have the medical industry's different in that you have to go through substantial training, and that substantial training is usually done by people who've been out for years. And so it's kind of the old guard is in charge. And until you change that guard, which is going to take, as you said, decades for the next generation to lead that, it's going to be a slow change. Whereas in the business world, you can pivot immediately and start going different directions. And small business owners can immediately say, we're going to be purpose driven. We're going to change now. And that is one of the main differences there. And it also comes down to who's paying the bill. And unfortunately, in medicine, it's rare that people are willing to pay money to improve their health. They all want to whatever the insurance company covers. And I know for me that I actually spend money on my health. Actually, after our podcast today, I'm going to see my doctor who does ART therapy, and he's going to help me have greater flexibility. He actually opens up my muscles and allows them to move better. Insurance doesn't. I pay him cash because insurance would laugh at this whole thing. But I think it's coming, and the changes are there. And the more we learn, the more people can make better choices.
They are coming, and there's no question. There are now some insurance companies that will pay for things like acupuncture, which was unheard of, decades ago. No, that would have never happened. There are some insurance companies that will pay for massage, because massage, everybody should be getting a massage once a week. And that's true. and if that was paid for by the insurance industry and people were getting massages on a regular basis, there would be so much less issues in terms of physical and so when you're talking about motoric issues and particularly as people get older. I mean, there's science that we know that getting a regular massage is good for us, but not everybody's on board with that yet. So this is not. I don't want to sound hopeless. I mean, there are changes coming, and you're starting to see them, just not probably as quickly as one would like as it relates to the medical field.
So I kind of lucked out. My gym has these water massage tables, and you can just go sit in them. There, you have an enhanced membership. It's free. So you just go hang out for 10 minutes, and I feel different when I get off. And I try and go as often as possible.
That's awesome. Enhanced. Look at Rocky. You are enhanced.
You don't get it with the basic membership. You need to pay for the extra level to get to use all their massage chairs and their massage tables and all of that kind of stuff, and the red light therapy and all the other things that they have. So, hey, it's worth it. It's a small price to pay, and it's a lot cheaper than having to pay for an actual massage every week. So it works out.
Good deal.
So let's dig into one of these tools that you've created. Is there one in particular you think that would be best to share with the audience?
I definitely do. We're really operating in the space of three main categories, those being trauma, addiction and recovery, and human performance. And so for your audience, I think the one that would probably resonate most powerfully is an instrument we've created called POWERS, which stands for Predictor of World-Class Excellence Rating Scales. And the reason why we created POWERS is that looking at the space of strengths and looking at some of these industrial organizational psychological tools, so we ripped them all apart. And so I'm not here to bash the DISC or bash the VIA or Clifton Strengths Finders, any of those things. Everything has positives and negatives, but we did feel as though the DISC, for example, we felt that just putting a small dot in a quadrant really didn't encapsulate all about a person. And that one had research. The research on that one goes back to 1928. So we didn't feel like dominance was a category worth celebrating in 2019. And then another thing that was really motivating for us is just knowing your gifts isn't necessarily enough. And what I mean by that is I was sitting at an event, and I was fortunate enough to hear Garrett Gunderson speak about a study that Forbes did. And what they did was they took a look at some C-suite people, mostly CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies. So most would agree that in our society, in the United States, kind of the epitome of success would be a C-suite position in one of these top companies. And so they started asking these executives questions about their relationships with friends, relationships with their children, relationships with their significant others, questions about their health, questions about their emotional state. And I don't remember the numbers exactly, but an overwhelmingly large number of them reported failed marriages. They regretted that they worked 80 to 100 hours a week during their children's formative years, and now their kids are off to college. They don't really know them. Many of them had significant health problems because they neglected their health for the sake of, being at the office at 5 a.m. every single day and working till 10 o'clock at night, and really not taking the time to exercise properly, to eat properly, and do the things that they needed to do for that balance. So when we created Powers, what we created was a tool that looks at 21 dimensions of success that are empirically driven. And notice I said success, and I'm talking about success in life, not just success in business. And there is a massive distinction. Certainly, we take a look at those things that are necessary for success in business, and we have corporations, coaches, and consultants using them for pre-employment screening, for team building, for leadership development within their organizations. But there are elements that extend, as I said, referencing that Forbes study, beyond just being outstanding at work. So one of the things we look at is your work-life equilibrium. We look at your wellness. How are you able to handle stress? How are you doing from a physical standpoint? We look at an introspective intelligence. Are you really able to accept setbacks in your life? How do you manage those things? How do you react to one from a standpoint of nonverbal communication, which is important in dealing in all of our relationships? We look at cultural intelligence. We look at rational intelligence. So we've got 21 areas that we're looking at. And like many of the assessments today, we talk so much about the benefits of technology. We wanted this thing to be completely digital, and so it is. So it's built with a HIPAA secure portal with military grade encryption and all these fun buzzwords I can talk about from a security standpoint. But what it does is it allows people to get the results instantaneously and access them anytime, anywhere from any device. And so what you're going to find out is you're going to get from our algorithm what is known as your 3 up, 3 down profile. And so what our 3 up, 3 down profile does, and we have this on all of our instruments, is it algorithmically determines 3 things where you're doing really well and 3 areas where you could improve. And so that gives you a blueprint to figure some of these things out and really start improving these areas where you might not be living an optimal life. So the cool thing that we've been able to do as well is we've got some really phenomenal content partners, and based on your test results, we can connect you with digital resources. So we're not trying to get you necessarily into a coaching session per se, but we're able to get you digital resources. Hey, this is an area that you're obviously not managing your life stressors as well as you could be. Here's a resource that can help you do that. And so we're very proud of Powers. That the feedback has been exceptional, and we created to be versatile and broad-based in terms of applications. So we're very, very happy about it, and appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about it on the show, and know that it's going to make a difference in your life if you take this thing, and it will give you a roadmap to start making some of those changes we talked about earlier on in the show.
And thank you for sharing that. And we'll dig into it a little bit more. A couple of quick points. One was knowing your gifts. And I know for me, this was a major struggle because your gifts don't seem like anything special to you, but they are to everyone else. And being able to figure that out isn't always easy. And I think that's one of the things that if you can figure out what your gifts are, it helps you to better then utilize it and find congruence with work and your personal self. I know with this, I started with a blog originally, and writing is not a natural gift of mine as much as speaking was. And so when I shifted from the one format to the other, things exploded. But it was because people kept telling me, you have the voice to be on the podcast. You should go do this. And so I didn't realize that from my standpoint. So that is, I think, very important. And you also mentioned the C-suite. And I think that is a shame because all of us at least in my generation, we're taught, you go to work in a company and you work your way up the ladder and you do these types of things. And I saw all those C-suite people and I saw how miserable they were and I saw how much of their time they gave up and how unbalanced their lives were. And so throughout when I was working, my whole career was stay so underemployed as possible so that I could have all the freedom to do all the things that I wanted and I wasn't so out of balance. And you can do that and still have dramatic financial success. You've also got to figure out what success means for you. So being clear on that, I think, is very important. Today's episode of Richer Soul is brought to you by Profit Comes First. Most small business owners find happiness in the parts of the business they love doing and working on. And unfortunately, for many owners, it's not looking at their numbers. I have heard many of them say that looking at spreadsheets and the figures is like a root canal. It doesn't have to be that way. At Profit Comes First, we help you implement systems to ensure that money is always there to pay taxes, make payroll, and of course, to reap profits. Those profits are the fuel that allow you to live the life of your dreams. What would it mean to you if your small business had a steady supply of profit to pay for all your needs and allow you to sleep at night in peace, knowing that all the bills were covered? Learn more at ProfitComesFirst.com, and you can also schedule a quick, no-obligation call to see if this system can help your business. Check it out at ProfitComesFirst.com. Now, back to learning how to increase our happiness. Society says the C-suite success, but as you talked about, it's not really successful. Divorce, not knowing your kids, having terrible health, those aren't at all success markers. So that's very important. I did take the test. I'll share my 3 up and down, but before I do, was there something else you wanted to add?
I think to expand on what you were talking about, we are moving towards a gig economy. I don't think there's any question about that. And so in a gig economy where it's not about you getting some kind of a entry or mid-level role and then climbing the ladder, doing your thing and reporting to 20 supervisors, your success or lack thereof is going to be determined by how well you can execute. What skills are you able to demonstrate? And the more you know yourself, the more readily able you're going to be able to articulate that. So I think really having that understanding of what makes you special is essential as we continue to see the business landscape shift towards that gig economy.
And so what I'm hearing from business owners and in the business community right now is they don't care about skills in the sense that things are changing so fast. The skills you might have had, like when I went to high school, it was learning how to type. Nobody uses a typewriter. The skills are changing. You can teach skills, but what you can't teach are the soft skills. And that's what I've been much more focused on with my kids is learning the soft skills, learning critical thinking, learning how to solve a problem, essentially. Here's a problem. How do we solve it? What are the multiple ways of solving it? Which is the best? Where can I find resources? How do I bring people together? How do I get a group to work together? Does the test help with that as well?
So some of the things that we look at are these skills that you talked about. One of the big ones that's really becoming a focus is emotional intelligence. And you hear now it's a buzzword, but for a while, people have been understanding that it's important. And so, we look at things like empathy. We look at your ability to interpret nonverbal communication. We look at how adept you are at communicating with others in social situations. But we also do look at things such as objectivity, how detail-oriented you are, your cultural intelligence, diversity, compassion. So all of these are things that are so critical, because what the research is starting to show, we used to really focus, and to a degree we still do, right? But I'm not saying a poor GPA is better than a high GPA.
My GPA in college was in the 2 range.
And mine was 2. I don't ever want my kids to hear this episode.
My kids know. They're like, look, you failed this. Why are you bugging me?
In my graduate education, it was really much, much higher. But the point being is that what we are now realizing is that EQ is as or more important than IQ. And Gary Vaynerchuk talked about this recently. I saw something on LinkedIn where he had this really great post saying that, as an organization, your weakest link is the emotional intelligence of your top people. So, if you have a sales manager who is low on emotional intelligence, that is going to basically be, the cap for your whole team in that respect. So those soft skills that you talk about are so very important, and it's critical that we emphasize them. And I love that you talked about them, that you think it's important to focus on them with kids, because it absolutely is. And so, we have other tools that we're, we don't have time to talk about today, but where we're working with children to really help them develop some of those things as it relates to athletics, because there's a breadth of opportunity to really develop young people and get them in these habits and understand their own talents and strengths when they're younger, so that they can be more successful as they go through their formative years. So it definitely is important.
And so I also did much better in my grad, because I wanted to be there.
That's right.
Versus
absolutely.
Undergrad, where I had no desire to learn this boring stuff anymore.
I think many agree with that. I didn't want to be in high school. I didn't want to be, I liked college, but not for the learning. I liked it for the friendships and football and Mario Kart. So very different when I got to graduate school, like yourself, for sure.
And we just had an episode where I talked about my coaching. So I coached my kids as they came up through. And I am not a sports person, so I never actually played sports as a kid, but I was actually able to coach sports because I turned the whole thing into a system of what are the skills that they need. But more importantly, we focused on what we talked about, the softer skills and the mindset and the belief that you could actually go out and win. And once you showed them success and show them how to win, the entire thing works. And so we were really able to help kids. And it's amazing what happens. If you can help a kid score his first goal, the whole world changes for him. It's like he opens up and realizes what's possible. And it's just fun to watch. It's fun to see that happen with the kids.
It really is. Absolutely.
So my 3 up were cognitive and intellectual tendency, family and friends, and physical wellness, which, the last 2 weren't surprising, because that's a big focus of my life, is relationships and health. And it's a big part of what we talk about. So I wasn't surprised to see those rise to the top.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Care to share your 3 down?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So the 3 down were kind of funny, because I looked at it and I go, that doesn't make sense, but I think it's because the way I looked at things. So my 3 down were detail orientation, empathy, and diversity. And I'll tell you why. It's because of the way the questions were asked. So when it comes to detail orientation, I do real estate, right? I can walk in a house and in 20 minutes, I see every single flaw, every single problem, every single issue, because that's where my focus is in that situation. So my detail orientation is through the roof. I do a lot of entertaining. So if I'm going to do an entertaining and I'm going to throw a party, everything's down to spreadsheets. Everything's down to a science of how many people can get served at a table quickly so that they don't stay in line. But if I'm not doing that, I don't care. Like, I don't fuss over details. So I'm not the person who has to know every little thing about getting something done. I'm okay just going with the flow of it and letting it be. So I think that's part of it is I don't feel like I need to know everything just to take action. But when I do stuff, I focus. And somehow I think that popped out differently in the way I answered questions. So I probably said a lot of things that were like, yeah, I don't really care, because it wasn't important.
Right, because that's how it would flag it, because the algorithm is looking for you saying things like, I need to have everything organized and I set my schedule or whatnot. But you, outside of those core areas that you talked about, or well, not your parties, but your work. So that's probably what flagged it. So that makes quite a lot of sense.
Empathy got flagged, and I know why. I am very much of a task-oriented person. So it comes back to the detail orientation, right? I walk in and I look at the situation. I'm not looking at the people. I'm looking at the problem and the solution. And that's why I always say life is so simple yet so hard. Fixing your life, fixing your money, all these things are really simple things to do. Just take these 3 steps. But the hard part is the person and the emotions behind it. And I think that's why my empathy came there, is because I am focused on the task and accomplishing the job. I don't worry about it, because in my personal life, I don't worry as much even about my own emotions. I'm like, this has to get done. Okay, I don't like it, but we're just going to, here's the task list, get it done. And I think that's why empathy popped up that way.
It absolutely makes sense. And it's interesting too, because when you get a score that highlights a focus area, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are the worst in the world at this. What it simply means is there are aspects of this where you can improve. And as I said, we have resources and micro courses to help people in those areas. But we really position the powers to help people see that this is not all or nothing. This is not black and white. There are strengths and weaknesses and things you're doing good and things that could be better. But again, what I love about you, and we have interpretive guides, and we really help people understand their results, and we certify people in the corporate space. We have a lot of corporate trainers who use this, and we certify them for that. But you're very insightful, and that's an important skill, because you're able to take these results and be able to say, yep, this makes sense based on what I know about my personality.
I'll give you a perfect example of putting the 2 of those together and where I struggle. Because I will go somewhere with my wife and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go do the detail thing. I'm going to go get 2 glasses of wine. And I turn around and my wife starts having conversations with people. And literally, I turn back around 3 minutes later and she's telling me this person's life story. I'm like, how did that just happen? What did I miss? Because she is very much about the person, whereas I'm focused on, we need to get 2 glasses of wine. She's focused on, who is this person in front of me? And so I know it's a skill that I need to work on, because from a soft skill standpoint in building relationships, it's very important. So I need to, when I'm in those situations, I need to get out of the task orientation. That's my normal routine, and focus on the person. And I think that's why with coaching, it works well for me, because I look at all the tasks and all the things that I have to help the person with, including the empathy part. So I understand the connection part and I'm more focused on it, but it takes me work to do that.
Awesome. It makes me so happy when I'm talking about people's test results with them and they really are able to just dig in and embrace and understand why they scored what they scored. I mean, it is algorithmically driven and self-scoring, but clearly, you've thought about it and see the path through to, make some of these adjustments based on the scoring.
And the last one was diversity. And This one I know, because I grew up as an Indian kid in America. So I was the one diverse person in the whole situation, because I grew up in an area that was literally 50-50 black and white. And there weren't very many Indian kids. There weren't at that time, there weren't many Hispanic. It was just, you're either black or white. There was no other thing. And so I think today I'm just like, you know what? Let's stop putting labels on people. We're all different. Deal with it. Move along. And I think, because when I went back and I read the guide for diversity, it just said that, I think it's because I don't judge people on it. So I don't even worry about it. I'm like, you're a person. Who are you as a person? I don't care what the container is. that you're in. And so I don't focus as much on that. And I think also because having to grow up in that type of an environment, I don't take things personally when people are like, okay, you're going to be racist, whatever. I don't need to be around you, but I'm not going to take it personally.
Awesome. I love it. Again, it just makes me so happy when I can go over one's results, because I don't do the coaching, right? Like we certify the coaches who do exactly what you're doing. And I think, you're right on the money in terms of why you scored the way that you did. And your profile sounds like it makes a lot of sense based on how you described it.
So I was looking at it because I didn't read as much, but you've got these little triangles in there, right? That kind of go off in 3 dimensions. Is there something to that triangle that people should look at, or is it just...
It's just a visual representation of the text. So basically the way that I love the triangles. So basically you're going to have these different dimensions for each of the main scales. So there's 7 main scales, and then there's 3 within. And so if you're, having a score of exceptional, which means this is an area where you're really gifted, an average score, an intermediate score, which says you're, average and doing well compared to most of the population, or a focus area, the triangle will pull to one of 3 lines. And I know this is hard to make sense over a podcast, but when you see it, it's pulling to where you are in the scores. All of our instruments have that, so that you have a nice visual representation of how your data actually presents.
And now that I look at that and you tell me that, it does make a lot of sense. Now that I have this information, I said, I know what my weaknesses are, and I work on them. I know what my strengths are. What do we do next?
So again, the really cool thing about Powers is it's giving you that roadmap, right? It's telling, okay, these are the things to address. And so we are continuing to develop and roll out content to address all of these specific issues. In the next month, we're rolling out 7 main micro courses with sub courses. So basically, for example, any of the 3 down that you wanted to address, you'd be able to take a micro course. So we price these to where they're very reasonable and accessible for everybody. So that's going to be a step you can directly take. And then after that, we continue to build relationships for each of these dimensions with our premier content partners who can take you even deeper if you wish to go deeper. So, we give you the blueprint, and we have tools to get you started. And for those that want to keep going down that path, we continue to provide them additional content where they can make changes.
And that's what we always have to do, is consistently improve and make changes. So I know that you have one other thing, and I think this is important because we always try and bring this back to, okay, this is, out there in the psychological realm. Maybe it's a little woo to some people. How do I take this and use it to come back to the core, which is money? And you've actually got a guide that actually helps you look at who you are as a person based on this, and then tie it back to a dream job, don't you?
That's absolutely right. So we are excited about the fact that one of the things that our mission is to help people become the most fulfilled in their life. I mean, my mission, I know I talked about this on our last episode together, was to help people become the best versions of themselves. And part of that is spending your time in a career, whether you're working for somebody else or an independent contractor, or doing it on your own, something that brings you fulfillment and happiness. And so we've created the Powers Dream Job Guide, upon which you can use your results to go through and really, based on your strengths and those areas where you're not as strong, maybe where you should be. So I would certainly make the argument that an individual who has a significant issue with, like you did, in terms of detail orientation, that person should probably not go into accounting, right?
So there is a classic example, right? When it comes, because I do taxes, and this does my wife. My wife is the detail one in that area, because I'm just like, I don't want to look at those.
Right. But you have a person on your team to offset those areas where you're deficient. And not everybody has that. Or a lot of people go into a job because, but there's so many reasons why somebody goes into a job, right? At a core, we all need money to live. But some people go into a job because there are expectations placed on them by, be it a relative or somebody important in their life. Some people take a job because, hey, they knew somebody and a position was open, but they're not happy. If you are going into your job or doing your work day in, day out, and you're not fulfilled, then you need to be doing something different. And so the Powers Dream Job Guide can help you with that. And so what we are going to do, what I'm happy to do, is for anybody listening to this who goes and buys the Powers and, adds to your shopping cart the Powers Dream Job Guide, we'll give you that for free if you use the discount code Richer Soul, all one word. And happy to do that for your audience. And the people who have gone through and used the Dream Job Guide absolutely love it. And it's a really cool guide that we've created.
And thank you for sharing that. I think that's wonderful and it's important. And I will tell you, when you have alignment between your life and your work and you're excited about what you do, and it's no longer work. It's fun. You're excited to go do things because they're enjoyable. And that's kind of the greatest place to be in life. And that's where I've finally gotten to that point, and I am thrilled that, the ability to help people and to watch them succeed, and it's just a lot of fun. And so once you figure all these things out and you can put your puzzle pieces together, life becomes amazing.
This is true.
Is there anything else on the subject that you wanted to share and didn't get a chance to?
The URL, I think we've covered it, and it was really fun going over your results. So if you're listening to this and you're tired of not having balance in your life and knowing what are the things that can help you elevate things and be happier and more fulfilled, check us out at seekyourpowers.com and use that keyword Richer Soul and at checkout when you add the Dream Job Guide, and we'll give you that as well. But feel free to reach out to us. We love feedback, and we could do a whole nother episode on all the other things we're developing. But we're just grateful for the opportunity to help people live their best lives.
And that's what this is all about, is helping everyone to live their best life and enjoy it. You only get one shot, so you might as well make it good.
Absolutely.
So I always like to ask for an action step. What is something people can do this week to move forward?
Well, I don't want to be cheesy and say, go take the Powers, but really start thinking about, because you said this so well, Rocky, about 15 minutes into our conversation, start thinking about your values, start thinking about what matters to you, and think about things in the context, not of money, but just through a lens of, if money wasn't an issue at all, like if you had all the money in the world and all your financial needs were met and you had that security, what would get you excited? What would you be passionate about? And if you start with that conversation, it's a conversation that most people don't have with themselves, but I think we all should. That's really going to get you into a mindset of what are you doing that isn't in alignment with that? Because that vision of yourself is your best self. And then from there, then go take the power. Because, but no, I'm joking. But you have to know who you are before you know how to get to where you want to go.
And that's very true. You have to know who you are and where you're going. And that's, the tagline for Richer Soul is, you got rich, now what? So once you do get the money figured out, then what? We talked about the C-suite people. They have the money, but their life's a disaster. Now what? You got to go fix it all, I guess. Or you fix it up front and you never make those mistakes.
Amen.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
That one is easy for me. I spend time every morning and every night focusing on gratitude. I start my day with 3 things I'm grateful for. And as I recap my day, and I do this in my journal, 3 things that went well that I was also grateful for. Because when you're focused on those things in your life that are going well, even when you have setbacks, because we all do, no matter what, it makes dealing with them much easier.
And then it does. And I do something very similar. I mean, I was at the gym this morning, sitting in the parking lot, and I took a minute, and it's raining. And I was just like, thank you for the rain, because it waters the lawn, it waters the flowers, it makes life happen. And I could take a negative view to it, but I understand it has a purpose, and I'm grateful for it.
Absolutely.
What did you learn later in life that you wished you would have learned sooner?
I think it's interesting because I learned later in life to not chase the dollars, but I don't think I would have accepted it when I was younger. Certainly not before my accident. After my accident, I would have. But money is great to a point. Like there's a number we all have, and that number is different for each and every one of us. But once we've reached that number and we have security, when you are just getting more and more of that, it doesn't bring us any kind of fulfillment. So when I was young and I was just solely focused on chasing as much money as I could and empire building and killing myself, working 80 to 100 hours a week, it would have been cool if my older self could pull me aside and say, hey, this is nonsense. Follow your gifts and follow your heart. I don't know that I would have been ready to hear it, like I said, when I was 23, but had I picked that up a little bit earlier, it would have made my life better for sure.
And, we kind of started there where I was talking about, if I had access to all this information when I was 22, how the world would have changed for me. But the reality is, I think when I was 22, I probably wouldn't have listened to any of this. I'd be like, that's crazy. You don't know anything. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Last question. What one piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Focus on relationships and put those relationships before you put anything else. Because ultimately, the people who are most fulfilled in their life have deep, meaningful connections with people. And I don't just mean a significant other or a kid. I mean the people that you choose to surround yourself with. And I'll give you a 4th or I guess a 3B, though you didn't ask for it. It's equally important that you make a concerted effort to surround yourself with people that are going to support your goals and that are positive and believe in you. I once, when I was in my early 20s, found myself at a Thanksgiving party because I had just moved to a new town. I didn't really know anybody, but I got invited to this Thanksgiving, and everybody went around the room, and I didn't know this till I got there, but it was called an unthanksgiving celebration, where everybody went around and complained about things. And so, I would avoid that today like I would typhoid, right? So, surround yourself with people who believe in what you're doing, add value back to them every day. And you do those things and you're going to have a pretty good life.
And that's very true. You have to remove the negativity from your life. You are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with.
Right. The Jim Rohn quote. We can't have an episode without a Jim Rohn quote. So I'm glad I was thinking it, but I'm glad that I snuck that in there. It's very good.
You've got to surround yourself with what you want to be and who you want to be around. So if people would like to find you and connect, where can they find your podcast and your other work as well?
So the best way to check out me and all the things I'm doing, including my charity and podcast, is at drrichardschuster.com, drrichardschuster.com, although I bought every imaginable domain with spelling configurations. So spell it any way you want. You'll get to me. And then again, to check out the power specifically, you can go to seekyourpowers.com.
And we will put all of that in the show notes to make it easy for people, and they can find you quite easily. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a wonderful conversation.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I always enjoy my conversations with Dr. Richard. I love the work he's doing with his charity and also helping to make the world a better place. I have to admit, since thinking more about the assessment and my issues with details, I realize this is probably a bigger issue that I do need to focus more on. I think I'm going to revisit this and how I can be more focused so that I can ensure I don't miss small details. I love taking different assessments to see how I'm doing and to learn my strong and weaker points. They help me to become a little bit better every day. I don't think any one assessment is perfect, but together they help us to sharpen ourselves. This week's action step was to think about your values, and that goes with last week's action step of thinking about your vision. They go together. Once you know what these are, life and decisions become so much easier. If you're still listening, you must have liked this episode. So please share it with a few friends. It can start a great conversation, and I'd appreciate it. You can also connect with me on Facebook, either on the Facebook page or the Facebook group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me. We can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. It's rocky@richersoul.com. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how this episode or others has helped you move forward. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.